over, it's fallen on the floor. Excellent. Retrieve that one. That's great, thank you. And over in the east, it's about this walking and talking process that I'm doing. So what I'm going to do first of all, because we are, it's quite short the time we have together, I'm going to ask for a show of hands about where you want to go first. I'm not attached to where we go first, so we can go north, south, east, west, and I'll talk about one of those things, and each one of those things has exercises attached to them. You choose. Okay, so show of hands for...
Can we switch the west and the east around there?
Oh, I've done it the wrong way round. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much. As a facilitator, I like to bring all of myself, including the bits that fuck it up. So, there we are. What I would like with Lucy?
Yeah.
Great. Can I get you to just help me with a show of hands and seeing?
Yeah.
So, what I'd like is a show of hands for who wants to go to the north first.
We could just walk to our favourite spot.
Ah, that's a great idea. Yeah, I love this. All right. Okay, walk to your favourite spot. You decide where you want to go first.
Oh, me too.
Can you kind of bunch together so it's really clear as to who's where? So, oh. Okay, I think this side, isn't it? Have I got that about right?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's, so. Okay. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is I'm going to ask you, because this is where we're going first, and then I suppose what we could do is think about where we're going to go next. Oh, it's tight between these two, isn't it? How many people in that one? Where are you? Are you there or there? I think that side has it then. Okay, so we're going to go here first, and then we're going to go there, and then we're going to go there and there. Can somebody remind me of that, please? So somebody can be the kind of person who's going, okay, this is north, this is south, this is east, this is west. And we're going here first. So what I would like you to do is, I'd like you to just walk around the room. I'd like you to mill about just for a moment, and as you're milling about, you can kind of link eyes with people, and then at a certain point I will get you to stop, and then I want you to pair up with the nearest person to you, and hopefully that will be something you don't know. So if you stop, you pair up with the person you don't know. Okay, don't get into conversation. It'll be really easy to do that, but we have a very short time. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, for a moment, what I'm going to ask you to do is just stand opposite this person and have a good look at them. Okay? Okay, and then when you've got a good sense of this, you've had a good look at them, you've looked at each other, I want you to notice that actually where you are is in opposition. Okay, now, because you're opposite each other, okay? So being opposite each other leads to a very easy polarization of actually opposition. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is, with your partner, I'm going to ask you to turn so that you are now shoulder to shoulder, or even if that doesn't quite work out height-wise. And I want you to just notice that. I want you to notice that in your bodies. How does that feel? And I want you to look at each, just have a little glance with the person that you're with. So most of the situations that we kind of set up in our workplaces most of the situations that we set up in our work environments are oppositional situations. So most of the time we spend in opposition, think of interview situations, think of work meetings. So this is the place where we are positioned frequently. So we're already starting on the back foot. So what I'm proposing is actually that we do it differently. And the other thing that we do as well, which I find really interesting, is that we do it in buildings all of the time. The idea of actually having a meeting outside, I mean, we haven't done any outside stuff at this conference, apart from last night, the social bit. But I mean, technically, we could have had some of these sessions outside, couldn't we? There was no reason why not, but we haven't done it because that's not the paradigm. So I'm really interested in challenging this current paradigm. I'm very conscious of time. Yes?
I keep reading this word paradigm, and I haven't got a bloody clue what it means.
Okay, model. There you go, that's a good word.
Way of thinking.
A way of thinking.
Okay.
A way of thinking, yeah, a model. A mindset, yeah.
That's probably
There you
why
go.
I don't understand.
Okay, so I'm actually going to come back to that, but I'm going to move on to the next bit because I'm really conscious of time. So where we're going to go next was, can someone remind me? South. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm just going to look at my notes, so it won't be a moment. So south, let's all kind of go to the south. Let's imagine the south for a minute. So I'm going to make some really bold statements, okay, which you may or may not disagree with. But if we take a bunch of countries in the south, okay, there's a greater sense of movement and expression in the south. Okay, so think of Brazilians, you know, very fluid in their bodies, you know, and these are, you know, I'm aware that I'm doing stereotypes, but this is movement, expression, and reflection is something that is innate in all of us. But in the West, for whatever reason, we've decided to cut ourselves off from our bodies, from our innate knowledge. And I'm proposing that actually, in order to really change what's happening, we need to completely re-engage with our bodies, completely re-engage with each other in a completely different way. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. I'm going to ask you to take a couple of big deep breaths. Feel into your body. Get a sense of where you are, your feet on the ground. What's going on? Are you a bit full after lunch, still hungry? Carrying a weak baby because you ate too many sandwiches. And now I want you to imagine yourself walking in an urban environment. So think of that urban situation where you're running late for a meeting, you're in a crowded city, you're having to be really purposeful and shut down to the stimuli around you almost in order to be very one directional, to get to where you need to go. Get a sense of what that feels like. Imagine rushing through Oxford Street or something. Get a sense of what that feels like in your body. Okay, you can let that thought go, and now what I want you to do is shake yourself like a dog. Okay? I love the way dogs shake. Just get it out of their system. Something unpleasant happens, they go, "Whoa." Okay. Okay, let's go back to the belly, back to the breath, back to the body. Close your eyes, breathe in. Okay. This time I want you to imagine yourself, you're outside in a favoured place in nature. Been walking maybe for a little bit. So whatever it is for you, whether that's a woodland setting, whether it's large vistas, whether it's by the sea, whether it's by a river, whatever it is for you, I want you to get a real visceral sense of that. Look down at your feet. What are you wearing on your feet? Or maybe you're barefoot. Feeling the grass on your toes or the sand. Getting a sense of the air on your face. Enjoying the colours, the smells. Noticing how your body feels in this environment. And I'm going to ask you to leave that, I'm sorry, because I'm sure it's lovely, and come out and give yourself another shake like a dog, and then wait, no, open your eyes. Thank you. And where were we going next?
North.
Okay. Okay, so a bit about me. Look at this face. I've been around the block. I'm quite old, despite what you might think. Oh, you're not that old, but I'm heading into 60. I've done all sorts of different things. Really broad background. So, you could say, oh, you never settled on anything then, so that's true. But one of the things I have done is a lot of observation. And what I've noticed, I've always been a great lover of the natural world, and I've been a great lover of being outside. And one of the things that I've observed is how people are when they're inside and how people are when they're outside. And so I did many years in event management outside, kind of working in, big festivals like Glastonbury, Waymad, and all of those kind of things, in production design and production management. I did an amount of time in training, and I used to teach women self-defense. And latterly, I did a postgraduate diploma in leadership facilitation and coaching. And it was actually a postgraduate diploma in humanistic psychology, because I'm really interested in how we are as human beings. How do we work? How do we sometimes not work? And through that time, I began to think, actually, how can I bring all of these pieces, all these disparate pieces of myself together? How can I kind of start grabbing hold of that bit of the jigsaw over there and this bit over here, and putting something together that actually makes some kind of sense? So, and that was how netwalking and one or two other walking offers that I do came about. And I'm not going to spend any more time on that than that. So the next place we were going was?
East.
Okay, and so the idea of, this is great to be a Wellbeing workshop on the floor, I love. So observing how people are, both inside and out, and what happens, when we're in opposition, when we're doing this, as opposed to when we do this, and what I noticed was actually when we're doing this, there's a kind of awkwardness to it, we're kind of in opposition and we feel like we need to come up with the goods, whatever the goods are, But the minute we do this, even if you and I were 180 degrees opposed to each other on every single possible opinion that we could think of, our entire bodies have gone, oh, that's nice. And the minute we start walking together, it's kind of like our bodies go, oh, that's really nice, we're going in the same direction. And when we're outside, if you think about all those occasions when you've gone into a meeting and suddenly you're in a meeting room and you're there in a meeting with Ted and you can't stand Ted and you know that there's going to be some kind of argy-bargy and it's like, oh, fuck, excuse me, I'm in a room with Ted, bloody hell, the reptilian part of our brain is going, get me out of here, I'm in a room with Ted, but actually you don't get out of there because we're grown up, so we kind of sit there and we do it. We sit in the room with Ted, but actually if we were outside, if we were walking outside, we were having conversations, with that group of people in different ways, we were pairing up, we were coming together, we were sitting down for a period of time as a group, we were moving on, we were doing different things. The reptilian part of our brain goes, oh, because the reptilian part of our brain knows that push comes to shove. I can run like the wind, or I can smack Ted, but actually I probably might smack Ted because I'm slightly more grown up, and I'm actually not going to do either of those things. But the fact that I can, the fact that there's no ceiling, there's no roof, there's no door, I'm not stuck in the room with Ted, means actually, thank God, it could be Jane, by the way, I'm not being sexist about this, it could be Jane that we're having an issue with, but So the work that I'm doing is around taking people and helping people to have deeper, more meaningful conversations on the move. Because for me, there's something very special happens when we're walking and talking together. And it means that we're all less threatened, which means that we can dive into some really juicy subjects in a way that we would feel less inclined were we stuck in the room. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I think I've been everywhere, to all of those directions. I'm going to invite you, because the next workshop will require chairs, I'm going to invite you to just help me put the chairs back, and then I'll take a few questions if you've got any. Is that okay? Thank you very much.
Imagining my landscape with you.
No, not
Really
at all,
nice, I
not
needed
at
it.
all. So.
She's organised.
Okay, so if anybody's got any questions, we've got about 5 minutes for some questions before we move on to the next presentation. I'm really happy to answer anything. And I'm equally happy if you've got nothing. Okay.
Looking at this position, the confrontational and ethical partnership, when we are facilitating a group, is it good, or would you recommend a circle sitting
Yes.
around the circle?
Yes.
Is that more comfortable?
Yes,
than
yes. Without question. Yeah. In my opinion. Just call out, don't, just go. If you've got any questions, do it. We've only got 5 minutes. Yeah?
Can you give us an example maybe of a certain group that you've had real success with?
So I do the kind of the networking for different groups in different contexts. I'm also a facilitator at Schumacher College. I work with Satish Kumar on his Earth Pilgrim course. So different contexts and groups require different input and require different things. So, you know, it can work at many different levels. So it's great if you've got a group of people that need to get to know each other very quickly, then it's a really great process. You know, you don't have to do raft building. You know, you can literally just go for a walk. What I do is I change you know, I help people to change pairs. The conversation kind of goes like that. You know, diving into the meat of the matter, coming out again the other side. So we're starting with very innocuous questions, you know, like what brought you here today, or, you know, how are you? Or, you know, those kind of, you know, very easy, just let's relax into something before we dive into something more meaty. We had, so recently I was doing something for a group of user experience people who wanted to attract more people into their conference. So it wasn't at their conference, but it was a way of people to come and talk about user experience. So we matched a number of wannabes with a number of already existing people working in the user experience, for example. And so then they were able to kind of, we crafted a number of questions together, myself and the person who all, you know, wanted me to do the walk, in order that these people could have get a better understanding of what it was. And yeah.
Rosalind, I'm a newbie to permaculture, and I can feel why this is relevant to permaculture, but could you put a few words around that for me? How does it link up with the sort of
well, I'm not
doing?
out of the permaculture stable necessarily, but it felt to me like it was a really good fit, which is why I asked if I could speak at this conference, because it felt to me like it was a really good fit. Because one of the things that is one of the tenets, isn't it? It's kind of earth care, fair share, people care. And so for me, there's something coming out of a holistic stable. I'm really interested in, you know, how do we look after this? You know, I mean, we've arrived at a place in most conventional workplaces where actually this is taking care of it all. And in fact, we, again, a very broad sweep of the brush, but what we say is actually leave most of your humanity at the door and just bring in, you know, your intellect. That's all. We don't want any of the rest of it. We don't want your personal issues, we don't want your spirituality, we don't want your emotional life, we don't want your physical life. Leave it at the door. Now that's, you know, again, a broad sweep of the brush, and I know that all workplaces aren't like that. But I think that within the permaculture movement, there's a sense of, actually, let's try and create a society where we're bringing all of ourselves, you know, into situations. And for me, that's where the fit is. Does that answer the question?
Do you like going and teaching this to people that are in kind of like high stress work situations? Because like I would have, years ago when I was working in a high stress work situation, I would have really benefited from this sort of thing, like to empower you to go, I'm not going to walk into this meeting now, I'm going to hold it outside. Or like, are you teaching people this?
Not yet, is the short answer to that. Because I'm a bit of an edge walker, and I'm a bit of an agent provocateur, so for many more conventional organisations, I'm too fiery. You know, I'm too, you know, it's too, you know, and I'm not very good at duffing off all I can, you know, and making myself small and fit in a very small place in order that somebody could then go, oh yes, it's all about performance management. Because it isn't all about performance management. You know, I'm not here to enhance your performance, although that may well be a byproduct. So I'm in tension over that question in terms of the corporate section. Two more questions maybe? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Now, the next two of us are a little bit more rule-bound with you, Rosalind. So we are doing presentations, so you are sat in the right place. But we do need to put the blinds down so we can see the PowerPoint. So somebody put those two down. I'll put this one down.
Actually, I'll set my chair.
Oh. It's quite nice in the dark, isn't it? Makes it feel quite sort of cozy. It's nice looking out as well. Okay, let me introduce myself. I'm the next up for the next half hour. And like I just said to Rosalind, I'm a newbie to permaculture, and it's a world that sort of really, I first came across it only at the beginning of this year, but it sort of chimed in certain ways, and I'm going to try and explain a bit of that through a project we've been doing for a few years, 20 miles to the west of here. Which direction is that? That's that way, isn't it? So, but it is all about new paradigms and a different way of doing things, so I hope that will come across. I'm a psychiatrist by background. I was a general practitioner before that, an NHS psychiatrist for the last 30 years or so. And recently I've also got an academic post as sort of this strange title, Professor of Therapeutic Environments and Relational Health at Nottingham University in the Department of Sociology. So that's my own sort of professional background, and I usually work with other people who sadly weren't able to come today because we could only afford 2 of us, and Fiona was going to come, is dead poorly. Fiona's a service user herself who's been through these therapeutic programs, and we often do a double act. It's a shame she's not here because she certainly adds a great deal to it that I can't quite do by myself. Okay, so the name of our, it's a little social enterprise actually, is Growing Better Lives. That's the project, and we call it green care, although actually I am coming to realise that actually it's very close to permaculture, so I will try and take you through that and explain it. So there's this strange feeling of familiarity when I came across permaculture, and it makes sort of sense. It pulls together a lot of these threads that a bit like we were talking about just now actually, to try and put into sort of coherent framework the sort of stuff we've been up to. And I think our value base is very close. I'll come back to that a bit in a minute with the sort of ethical things that I've heard about from permaculture. And I think we are very much also thinking of complexity in emergent processes. So rather than things being linear and sort of causes this, causes this, causes this, all sorts of chaotic things can happen and come together in interesting new ways that can have an impact on people's health and mental health. I think we're human scale and we're person-centred in the sort of work we're doing in this project, and it's relational and systems-based rather than individualistic and sort of atomising. It's joining things up rather than taking them apart and examining each bit. Okay, so that's sort of where we are. Oh, and then this came to me this morning actually, I just put this slide on there. Permaculture, it's very clear from everything I've been hearing in the last couple of days, permaculture is better for our planet than chemicals are, and I think permaculture is better for our brains and minds and spirits than chemicals are. So I'm an unusual sort of psychiatrist, and I usually take people off medication rather than put them on it, because I think there's much better ways of helping people to heal. Thank you. That's very nice. Time to be before. Right. The usual audience is I talk to are much stiffer than this. so Kevin Mascarenhas, I don't know if anybody knows him, but he's a permaculture teacher fellow, and he came across us at the beginning of the year, and he ran a 2-day permaculture workshop in our yurt, in our therapy yurt, over there, and just been sloughing up to it. And it was called Sustainability of Mental Health Projects, Developing a Green Care Mental Health Service Using an Integrated Systems Approach. A bit of a mouthful, but I think that sort of, again, shows the link with permaculture. Here he is teaching in our special space, a circular space, which I think is very important, no corners, no hard edges. And here we are all having lunch together at the event. We have 1 or 2 events a month at our yurt for various sort of educational things. So green care, let me tell you a bit about the background of green care, which is what we've been doing for a few years now. It includes things like therapeutic and social horticulture. Animals are very important in it. Care farming, I heard a mention of this morning. Ecotherapy, now I presume you've heard of ecotherapy to some extent. There's different definitions of ecotherapy. In a way, all of green care is ecotherapy because it's using the environment as part of the therapy program. But the researchers we work with have made a specific definition of ecotherapy, and that's a reciprocal relationship. So in ecotherapy, you are giving something back to nature as well as getting something out of nature towards your therapy. So it might be restoring canals or building dry stone walling or something like that, where the relationship is two-way. The other sort of ones that are fairly well known are things like wilderness therapy, rural cross, forest and woodland things, green gyms, which are increasingly being sort of prescribed by GPs, and all sorts of other things. Anywhere really where nature is incorporated deliberately and actively and thoughtfully as part of a therapy program. Okay, evidence-based, where's it coming from? It's not just coming from nowhere. There's been thinking about it for the last few decades, the biophilia hypothesis, which we are biological creatures connected to nature in some way through sort of evolutionary biology, different ways of linking that in, and that was sort of articulated in the biophilia hypothesis. In other words, we have a natural love and part of and wanting to be with nature in some sense or other. More recently, more practical thing, there was a European Union working party that developed a conceptual framework, and I was one of the sort of token psychiatrists on that group, so that was a very interesting piece of work. So it pulled together all sorts of different theory and evidence of how effective this is to come up with a sort of a handbook of what's going on at the moment. They're hoping to repeat that in the next year or two and bring it up to date, because that's about 5 years old now. So that's where the word green care as such as this came from. Okay, why does mental health need green care? There's a lot of, I don't know how many people here know much about mental health and the British system at the moment, but it is becoming very regimented, very rigid. In times of austerity, this is happening to some extent, but also there's a lot of regulation, and I sort of call it industrialisation of the whole process. Mainstream mental health is becoming very bureaucratic and less therapeutic, I think. And so there's a sense that we've lost touch with each other and the natural world in this sort of system. And I think that's particularly true in mainstream mental health at the moment. And so green care is almost an antidote to that sort of institutionalisation. And it's not based on the sort of health as a commodity type view, me providing you a recipient, as it were. It's more the interdependence of us as people and valuing the relationships and all, which is a theme I'll come back to a couple of times. I mean, you may have heard of the recovery approach, which is, it's become a bit of a bandwagon, but it is a positive thing in that people are trying to get to a state where they have recovered a life worth living of some sort. But it's not quite the same as that. But I think it also, green care, can also incorporate sort of quite a spiritual dimension to it, which sometimes is religious in some programs I know, usually non-religious, usually sort of secular type programs. Here's a slide I show to adults about outcomes, because we're always asked about what are your outcomes? Prove that you're doing good. And I mean, this is probably second nature to people in permaculture, having lovely outcomes like this, but it's when I show that slide to a sort of medical or psychiatric audience, they think it's ridiculous. So it's sort of like almost amongst friends here when I show it. But that's the sort of to be proud of what you've actually grown yourself and then go and eat it is really a good outcome for us in our program. Okay, a bit more technical now. Sustainability is obviously a very important word and concept. And the triple bottom line, I remember Pandora mentioned it yesterday. That's the only thought back of it. How familiar are people with triple bottom line here? I mean, so you may have a better understanding of it than I do, but the way I understand it from what I've heard in the from people in the Royal College of Psychiatrists and stuff is that public services now have to be commissioned in a way that takes account of social, ecological and economic impact. And so all three have to be accounted for and covered and so they are sustained in a service that's being set up or commissioned. And we were very proud to get the National Sustainability Award for this project last year at the Royal College of Psychiatrists. It's the first time they've had one. We awarded it, so we went along with a piece of plastic. We've noticed we're all wearing sort of sprigs of flowers and vegetables coming out of our lapels, which will come to our sort of green care message that we're giving to people. And we did feel a bit like a sort of like aliens on the planet. In this sort of but anyway, that was a rather nice thing for us. So the three sustainabilities, though, we're economically sustainable. So these are the sort of justifications we use again for commissioners to explain what we're up to. Everything we do is in groups. A lot of self-help happens between people. This interdependence, and actually, I don't like using the word, but I use it for brevity. Say, patients are better at helping each other very often than we as professionals are. They know what it's like. They've been there themselves. They often talk to each other in detail about just what it feels like. The groups we work with all make the environment themselves, so they produce that environment in both the physical environment and the psychosocial environment. And actually, when we're doing green care things get produced. We haven't produced much that's saleable at the moment. We've certainly produced quite a lot that's edible that we've had as part of our green care project. And also, it's economically sustainable because it's an interesting, different paradigm, more interesting, engaging way of doing mental health. We get lots of people coming along wanting to be volunteers as either assistant psychologists, associate psychotherapists, and other volunteers. So that helps its economic sustainability. I think fair shares is the permaculture word, isn't it? And I think I'll say a bit more about our therapeutic community methodology in a minute, but that's very much about a sort of flattened hierarchy with everybody being treated and respected in an equal way. So I think that fits with the fair shares ethic as well. Final one, ecological sustainability, sort of goes without saying in a sense, but our project is based in an environment centre where they've got photovoltaic panels, and we run an organic allotment there. I mean, several of us apart from ours, but ours is, we're very much into composting. Our horticultural therapist, is a master composter herself, and so we sort of watch compost under the microscope and all sorts of stuff like that. My yurt is pretty energy efficient. We've got a wood burning stove and things. We try to use as little public transport as possible and Skype for meetings and stuff. And one day we hope to build some new buildings out of cob or straw bales or the sort of things we've been hearing about here, and even have sort of off-grid power. So that's hopefully for another day in the future. Social sustainability is the core of what we do in mental health, really. People are living unsustainable social lives in with their relationships have fallen apart in some sense with each other and with themselves. And personality disorder is our own field. I've left that in there. And so we base our work on group analytic concepts, which are really about setting an emotionally safe space within a group, within which people feel they belong and they feel emotionally safe and can do the work they need to with us and with each other. And it's that network of relationships that does most of the work. I won't go too much into the sort of psychological, psychoanalytic theory of it, but that's where we're coming from. But another frame of looking at it is this adaptogenic concept, which is from Eastern medicine, from sort of ginseng and Chinese herbal type things, I think, where you're aiming for a better equilibrium, chemical equilibrium within the system, rather than a simple cure. And I think we're adaptogenic in the same way with relationships. We're aiming for healthier relationships, rather than a complete sort of cure of some sort. And so the relationships are with our planet, our countries and cultures, each other, with our patients and with ourselves. Our relationship with ourself is very important as part of that. And it's always there under scrutiny, being talked about, thought about, understood together. And that's at the core of a thing we call enabling environments, which is a project of the Royal College of Psychiatrists I'm involved with, where we aim to set up and recognise and help people to set up psychological environments that are enabling. And enabling is a word I've heard quite a lot at this conference too. So again, lots of bits that fit with the work we're doing. Okay, so I'll move from there to actually something what we've been up to over the last year or two, last 4 years actually, and the sort of irony of our own sustainability, because we don't feel very sustainable as an organisation. We get into all sorts of trouble. So here goes the winter of 2010. So we first put up our yurt, first thing we put it on, it snowed the next day, and you're not meant to get the wood wet or anything like that, so immediate sort of unhelpful situation we're in. And so we decamped and we started holding our groups in straw bales in the adjacent polytunnel with the fire burning there, and we had to have people sort of digging out the snow. We did still manage to sort of sit around the fire and sort of warm ourselves from time to time. And so toast some chestnuts, I think, instead of coming up to winter a couple of years ago. So it's a different sort of setting to most mental health clinics, I think you'll agree. And so that was the sort of hard winter of 2010. And then things looked up for our launch party, which was May 2011. We set everything up nicely, and we were living on a patch of land in a council garden, Slough Garden Centre. It's that council garden where they grow all the flowers from the roundabouts and things. So that's where we put us, and we had a sort of wishing tree, a willow circle wishing tree there with wishes on it. We have a stall of all we're up to. That's a sort of biblical look to it, that one. Lovely, isn't it? Our patients' children. And that's inside the yurt at that time. But again, lovely space, really nice space to be doing work of this sort. But unfortunately, just after the party, it was announced that they're selling the garden to turn it into housing, and we had to go somewhere else. So that was over that summer, and then winter came again, and it was a very wild winter, that one. And all our dear, and we brought a few of these animals for our launch party to celebrate, and they all fell over and got broken, and everything felt rather grim. The yurt fell down. It started as this shape, it snowed, and the weight of the snow, boom, and the whole thing fell down and broke loads of the poles. And it was hard times, there we are. And then it got cold and rainy, and we had to really put it up right, and the whole thing went mouldy, and we started climbing into the furniture inside, and across the floor, slime and mould, and up the chair legs, all these tribulations. And we had to eventually wrap the frame in tarpaulins and send it all off to be processed and sort of sorted out before we were all right again. We did manage a Christmas party though. There's all decked up for Christmas. Then we built it again properly this time. Here you are, you've got the crown. It's a lovely building in Gert, actually, beautiful sort of shape and structure. You have the crown at the top. You put the fences all around the edge, and then you put the crown up, and you connect all those poles, the ribs, to the crown there. It's Matthew holding up the world with his shoulders. And here we are. That's when you put the felt on. There's about an inch of felt to keep it warm through any weather, really. They're usually used in pretty adverse conditions in Mongolia, so it certainly keeps warm well in winter. And there it is as it's set up in the environmental centre where we work. So that's a bit about our sort of trials and tribulations over a couple of years. I'll just say a little bit about what we do in the programme, how we use these ideas of nature as part of the therapeutic programme. Where are we? We are here. I've already said we're here now, and we're just inside the M25 here between Slough and Uxbridge. And we're in Iver Environment Centre, which is actually owned, the land is owned by the National Grid, and the site is run by a national charity called Groundwork, which is an environmental education charity. We're their first mental health project. So here we go, here's the classroom block and the buildings that we work alongside. Here's a willow tunnel they've got there. There's a lovely setting right next to lots of sort of electricity substations, so all sorts of industrial machines just out. You can't see them most of the time because they're at the side of the trees. And there's our yurt across the pond, and that's coming into the doorway to it. And here's somebody planting some flowers and things. A bit of produce, one of our groups. I think that's last year's crop. More harvest here from last year, and more again. We've got a farm next door. Do a little bit of work with the farm, but particularly there's horses there. And horses are very emotionally sensitive. All the time for equine therapy. Actually, I think it's about the expression of the way emotions are held in the body, and I think a lot of people can benefit from contact with and understanding. And done under the supervision of a proper equine psychotherapist, I think that's a very powerful method. So what do we actually do together in this yurt, in these groups? We've only got 2 groups running a week at the moment. We're hoping to expand that, but the structure is everybody checks in first. So we sit in a circle, none of this sitting face to face, and none of this avoidance sitting side by side either. We're in a circle together, as it were. And we have a check-in at the beginning, so everybody says how they've been since the last time we met, and then sort of supports each other with any things that have come up. Then we choose the activities for the day, and there's a whole range of different activities, from planting to composting to painting things to cooking to numerous different things. Minimum subgroup must be 3, because we're very group-based, and so you have a dyad, you can have tricky things going on. Once it can stay in 3s, it's more of a group process that happens. And then we have a check-out at the end of the day, when everybody says how they are, and we have it's a sort of risk assessment really to make sure everybody's okay to go home and support each other if they need to before they go home. Now, our normal group, the Thursday group, which is our main one at the moment, is people arrive at 10 o'clock for the check-in, and the people can check out and go at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's a sort of all-day green care group that people do with us. Relationships, I keep going on about relationships. Quality of relationships is what this whole technique is about, in a sense. And in green care, it can also be our relationship with nature and the planet and the wider world. So a much more sort of broader, holistic vision of things than just a dyadic relationship, as in one-to-one psychotherapy, or group relationship, as in group psychotherapy. It's more than that, I think. Containment of boundaries. I won't go on about this. I've only got a few minutes left, and I'd like to just get through it if I can. We have activities and special events. We go lambing every springtime, and that can be really important about attachment issues, things like how well they were mothered themselves, and all sorts of stuff like that can be very powerful. We have a sort of barbecue in the summer. We do something in the autumn. We're clearing up the pond there. Next week we're actually going on a barge trip up the Grand Union Canal, and then we have a Christmas do of some sort or other as well. I don't know who that fellow in the middle is, but they're the mental elves. These two, the mental elf service. You see. So. Sorry. Okay. So here's a few quotes from what people have said about it all. People who go to all sorts of other mental health groups and services and things. It's not therapeutic groups. It's working together, cooperative project, breaking down barriers, calming, peaceful space. Used to think it was a heap of shit. to me, so it's a bit hard to hear. She's only up for a minute.
Groups are very small, but when you're feeling down, you get the support from other people, but also when you're feeling good, you can then give the support to others, and also when you're giving the support, it's something that you've been through yourself, and it feels good. It feels great to help somebody else that's been in your situation. I also think as well, it doesn't seem to be them and us. When we have the dinners that we do halfway through, everybody's in the same room, so that staff and patients all together interacting, and you can talk about absolutely anything you want to, and it does feel different, that you don't think you're under anybody else. You're basically all the same level, and everybody sort of gives support to each other.
Okay, that's a very important principle of therapeutic communities, that we really do dismantle the us and themness. We're all stuck in it together. This is some output from some more formal qualitative research that Vanessa, one of our team, did. I won't go into that for now, but that's the sort of words that came out of it in a wordle from the sort of just putting all the words together and seeing what ideas came up most. Which are all quite magical, but actually these make sense, don't they? Togetherness, community, calm, sanctuary. Oh yes, damn, that's right. Very true, very true. Yeah, sadly still the case, so we still leak a little bit. Okay, where next? Just finishing up now to say a few things about what we do. I mean, we found it very difficult to get people to come, not to get people to come because they love it when they come, but to actually get it commissioned. I mean, we're still all doing it as volunteers, in fact, at the moment, but we've now got track to get a few. We can put on a track to sort of perhaps get funding, a little bit of funding for NHS patients to come our way. And then there's new areas that we're hoping to work in. I won't go through these details, but CAMS is Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. Children, when they finish with the children's services at age 18 on the dot, usually sort of fall off a cliff into adult services and get a terrible time. So we want to run a group that goes across that, as it were, gives them some hope for the future, of not being trapped in the psychiatric system for the rest of their lives, which can sadly happen. I've mentioned equine. I think animals in general are very important because people, when they've had terribly traumatic and abusive histories, as most of our lot have, can end up not trusting humans at all, but can start building a relationship with animals, and so that's sometimes a very good place to start. That's something we want to work on more. Veterans sort of with trauma from being in wars and things, obviously, addictions, dual diagnosis. There's a big project going on at the moment with homelessness in London. I went to meet some of them last night, actually. There's these things called psychologically informed environments being set up all over London for homeless people that have a psychological holding policy for people who are homeless in the hostels now. And they seem to be working really well. An equivalent is going on in prisons with psychologically informed planned environments, where, again, they're setting up, based on these ideas of the enabling environment, the network of relationships with people, they're setting up prison services where there's much less trouble in the prisons and people are actually being rehabilitated much more effectively, and it's a nicer environment to work, there's less violence, and the prison staff are finding it very positive. So those have all come out of these sorts of ideas of enabling environments. Yurtification is something my heart is close to. And since we've been going around telling people about this in the last 4 or 5 years since we've had a yurt, Cumbria's already got 3, so I'm very jealous, and they're linked together with sort of a kitchen in one of them, an office in the group or in another one. And so they've got a fantastic yurt set up in a project up there. The Retreat is the hospital in York. They're planning to get one for their one of their personality disorder programs. Nottingham University Counselling Service, a yoga therapist is going to set up yoga groups in a yurt there because they haven't got enough space for any groups as part of the University Counselling Service. Hiron House is a trauma clinic in Oxfordshire, and they've said they're going to get one. They want us to help them to set up how to use it. And there's 1 or 2 others that are talking about it too. So watch out for yurts in mental health service, and then you'll know that our green care ideas are getting out there, and tell people about them too. And if you're part of a mental health service, get a yurt. Highly recommended. Okay, I've got time to go through that lot, but we're trying to link across all sorts of disciplines. Those are our traditional disciplines in medicine and psychiatry and psychotherapy, and these are all sorts of things that we are trying to make contact with and talk at conferences like this and sort of make links to explain what we're up to. The latest scheme with our local manager, this comes to mind because of the talk from, what's he called, from Top Nest this morning. Yes, absolutely. we are going to try and turn Slough into a therapeutic community town. Now, those of you who know Slough might think that's utterly impossible, but we started last week when the mental health manager launched a thing called Hope College. And here is Fiona, who wasn't able to come and talk to us here, and Sharon, all our new members, with our stall at the launch of Hope College. And so Hope College is one bit, so people get sort of educational qualifications from doing therapeutic programs. So permaculture could well be included in that in some way. And so these ideas from transition, topness, and sustainability ideas in permaculture, I think that would make a very powerful mix to sort of have so people would experience a whole range of different ways of being cared for if they've got mental health problems in Slough and the area around. And that's what I call the golden thread, and it goes through all sorts of different things. So I can really see it here vividly in psychodrama. It's working in a way where relationships are more important than sort of individual needs and wants. The way we relate to each other is more important than any sort of material thing. Hard to pin down, but it's very visible when it's very detectable when it's there. And this is the statement we make. This is our sort of value statement for the project. Green care is a holistic and economically viable alternative to treatment with medication and hospitalisation. Sustainability is about connecting people to each other and to nature, helping people to see that there's a life worth living and on a planet that's worth living on. And so that's our sort of statement of what we're up to in this project. And I think it's got a lot to do with permaculture. And I think at that point, that's the end. So thank you very much. I will put out, I've got a bunch of leaflets. It's probably not quite enough for everybody, but I'll put them out over there on the table. If you want to take some as you go, so you can get in contact with us. You can come and visit if you want, things like that. Time for 1 or 2 questions before 3 o'clock. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's all we can do.
Having spent about 9 or 10 years working in a therapeutic community, I've seen most of them disappear from the NHS over my lifetime. So I'm quite encouraging to see some of those ideas coming back again.
Absolutely, and that's, in a way, that's my main work at the Royal College of Psychiatrists at the moment. The Enabling Environments Project is a spin-off from therapeutic communities. So it's using the idea and the sort of juice from therapeutic communities in new ways, like this prison programs, like the homelessness sector, like green care. And so I agree, it's terrible how they've gone by the wayside, as it were. But because I've worked all my life in therapeutic communities, some amazing things. Next.
How do you measure how successful this has been with your individual clients?
Questionnaires, lots of different questionnaires that are standardised and well known. I mean, the ones we use are CORE, Edinburgh Warwick Wellbeing Scale, HONOS, anyway, there's several I could give you details about what they are. There's several well-known questionnaires that measure different aspects of well-being, symptoms, problems, things like that.
Do they have to do them every visit?
Sorry?
Do they have to do a questionnaire every visit?
Absolutely not. That would be terrible. Maybe every 6 months or every year, but certainly not more than that. But we also do a group process with a thing called Recovery Star, which people have 10 names of how they're getting on, and they discuss it and draw themselves a chart for it, which they own and share with each other, which is much more effective, but it's an engaging process rather than just somebody telling them how they're doing, as it were. Yeah. Was there one other? Yes, go on. Yeah.
I was wondering if you use vegetables to grow for lunch.
Yes, absolutely. I forgot to mention that an important part of the day is lunch. And sometimes there will usually be a group that prepares lunch. And that will, when we can, using our own food we've grown, but certainly cooking things together in different ways to sustain ourselves. Yeah. Yes,
Can I sneak in a quick question?
go on, quick one.
All right, I'm really curious about how you sustain yourself as a bit of an edge walker within the Royal. There's a thing about edges in permaculture. Within the Royal College of Psychiatry, because it's not known for its expansive alternative thinking, is it? So, I mean, that's a broad question.
Good question. We support each other in it. We know there's other projects doing it, and we get together. And so a lot of support amongst ourselves. And actually, because we're therapeutic community based, we get an awful lot of support from our members, our patients as well, when it's working well. I mean, there will be days when we feel absolutely drained and with it all, but on the whole, it sustains itself because it is a functional system somehow. So, but yes, I mean, it is a strain, and walking on the edge is definitely something I know what you're on about. But actually, Norman Sartorius, who's probably the most celebrated psychiatrist in the world, as it were, came to the awards ceremony last November when we got our award. And Simon Wesley, who's the president of the college, he said, "Norman, what do you think about yurts?" And Norman Sartorius said, "Wonderful structures, nowhere to hide, so embracing and welcoming." So we've got the blessing of Norman Sartorius. And Simon Wesley, who knows what we're up to and likes it. So I think, the profession's got problems, but this is different to that. Very last one.
With your growing vegetables and talking about having them as lunch, have you got the capacity to consider the gut implications of fermenting some of those vegetables?
The what implications?
Gut, like the microbiome, gut health, and the impact on mental health?
No, we don't have the capacity or knowledge or expertise about that yet, but we have had a seminar recently that we must follow up with a nutritionist who came to one of our yurt seminars. So it's sort of there in the thinking somewhere, not very actively at the moment though, but I think that's probably something we'll hope to grow towards. Yeah. So I must leave it there because it's time for the third part. Thank
you. Sorry, just a minute whilst we change things over. Oh, that would be wonderful, yeah. I guess, sorry everybody, good afternoon to you all. Thank you very much for coming. I just wanted to say thank you to Rex and Rosalind for both wonderful presentations. That lady's just gone out to get us some technical help with this. So I'll just do a brief introduction and then the presentation's not super important, but it's nice because it's got quite nice pictures. So my name's Lucie Bradley and I'm a medical herbalist and I live and work up in Glasgow in Scotland. And I've had quite a broad range of experiences, and one of the reasons that I'm here today, I really want to contextualise that first of all, is that I did my permaculture training in Tanzania, and whilst I was doing my permaculture training, all the time I kept thinking, they're just talking about herbal medicine here. That it is all about herbal medicine, which is a very, personal view, but I could see all the echoes in permaculture that were coming back to herbal medicine, yet I didn't get any teaching on medicinal plants in my permaculture course, which I thought was a massive loss, because medicinal plants play such an important role in our lives and need to play a more important part in our lives. And so I wanted to come here and make this presentation to highlight how we could incorporate more information about medicinal plants, and that my teacher was very kind, an American guy called Steve Whitman, and I just kind of barged my way in and said, I want to teach on the class about medicinal plants. And he said, okay, cool, let's do that. So I did, and I've taught on quite a few permaculture courses in Tanzania. They were very, very open. I've also taught in Kenya as well. The teachers were very accepting, and herbal medicine is quite culturally embedded in Africa, which made it very easy for me to come into the course and teach. But here in the UK, I've not seen people really teaching about herbal medicine. So I've just come back from 3 years of living and working in Tanzania. I was working as a project manager for an organisation working in sustainable agriculture, but I was also, once you're a herbalist, you're always a herbalist. You can't ever get away from it. Not that you'd want to, but it's hard to disassociate from it. So I was doing a lot of teaching in herbal medicine as well, and prior to that, in 2009, I had a trip to Tanzania, and I was teaching first aid, and I couldn't understand why there wasn't more herbal medicine there either, because I thought, oh, it's Africa, they all do herbal medicine and it's all right there and that's what everybody takes. But they weren't, and they weren't very open about it, and there was enormous health problems that I was really naive about, but could see that there was really viable options by using herbs to take a different approach to treating those problems. I mean, cholera, malaria, anemia as a result of malaria, malnutrition as well, especially in children, fatigue, adrenal problems, kind of different problems to what we have here. Oh great, thank you. Sorry, Matt's distracted me a little bit. Yeah, so where there was loads of problems, so then I kind of just jumped straight in and was like, I need to get involved with organisations working with teaching herbal medicine in Africa, and I fortuitously came across a few organisations, the websites of whom is here, and they were already teaching about herbal medicine, and they were working a lot with church organisations, and they were teaching permaculture and sustainable ag and sanitation and hygiene. It was a very inclusive approach to teaching that they were taking, and they also let me come and teach more about herbal medicine. Their focus is about having home gardens, about empowering local people, especially women. Women were the primary people that we always worked with and were the most receptive in terms of herbal medicine, to have their own home gardens and also to learn more, but also to have confidence and trust in that what they were doing already, what was culturally appropriate and acceptable, that we were endorsing that as Western herbalists and Western scientists, because we worked with doctors as well, that we were saying, yes, this is a really great form of medicine. Thank you very much. So we worked a lot with local people, and it was about an exchange that we were always having in working with them, because of course we learnt a lot from them and they learnt a lot from us. So this reciprocity was very much there. And it was wonderful to see how what people gained was autonomy in their health, and there was this real, through using herbal medicine and nutrition and a more holistic approach, people became much more autonomous. And a personal, something that really drives me is helping people to have autonomy in their health. As a practitioner, as a clinical practitioner, but also as an educator as well, that, you know, how do we get more information out there about herbal medicine? So that's a little bit about what I've been doing. And so it's funny because I was doing a lot of field-based stuff. I'm also an ethnobotanist as well, and I've got anthropological training. So whilst I was working in Africa, I was doing a lot of information collecting. You learn a lot by listening to people's stories and letting them write it down and process it for them. But now I'm very much more clinical based in my own practice in Glasgow, but I also am still very much involved in education. But my demographic has shifted enormously, because in Africa I was working a lot with the rural poor, women of ethnic minorities, and now I'm predominantly working in a white middle class menopausal women clinic. Is the mainstay of my existence. But I have got a broad range of experience, and now I've come to a point in my life, and Rosalind, you also said it, like, where I can look at all my experiences and see, well, how do I put them together? And I see that permaculture, getting more involved in permaculture projects and teaching on permaculture projects about herbal medicine is really important, and that permaculture, it'd be really great to see more teaching about herbal medicine on permaculture courses. Maybe that means developing a syllabus for helping other people teach herbal medicine, or working with permaculture teachers to help them incorporate that into their syllabus as well. Just to say, herbal medicine is like such a massive topic, and I could talk for days and days and days about herbal medicine. So I'm going to try and cover the most important points, but if there's other stuff that you feel like I haven't talked about, come and approach me, and I'll give you my details as well at the end. So I'm really keen on information sharing as well. So here's a presentation. I guess what I also wanted to do first of all is just to see like how many people here actually use herbal medicine. If you just want to raise your hands. Right, so quite a lot. And how many people use herbal medicine as their primary form of medicine? Wonderful. Wonderful, that's really cool. And my other question is, how many people here are growing medicinal plants or have engagement with medicinal plants, the plants themselves, either for culinary purposes or medicinal purposes? So basically everybody in this room has experience with medicinal plants. That's really great. So I feel like I could sit down and we could just have a conversation about plants, really. Maybe I don't need to do the presentation. I mean, one of the things that I'm going to talk about, which I'm going to go a little bit more in depth, is about also the levels of knowledge. As an anthropologist, as an ethnobotanist, we did a lot of research and we taught a lot about levels of knowledge on the indigenous level. So, you know, something that's really important with autonomy is getting everybody in our communities to have a good base level of herbal medicine so that you could at least treat yourself. And the reason that I trained to be a herbalist was that I wanted to be able to treat myself and I wanted to be able to treat my family because I could see the limitations of pharmaceutical drugs that they were having on family members, that they were having on myself, and I felt that the only way that I could really attain optimal health was by taking a natural approach and really looking at everything together. You know, like Rosalind said, all of this, emotional, spiritual, physical, and that's the way that I would be really healthy and have a health that I was able to maintain.
You better click on the
Oh,
button before you
thank you. Oh, okay. So, it's coming up on, oh right, okay, there we go. So the presentation's called Sustainable Healthcare System as Part of Permaculture, Herbal Medicine for the Future. So I was going to talk a bit about what herbal medicine is. Everyone pretty much knows what herbal medicine is, right? People use it in different contexts, which is really interesting because when you travel to different countries, you see the same plants, and everybody will say it has a ton of different uses. No one use is right or wrong. It's just in the cultural context in which it's used. So it is really good to share information. Go on forage walks, go on herb walks, talk to people from different countries to give you more information about the uses of plants. It's a fantastic way of learning more about plants. I mentioned a little bit about permaculture and herbal medicine, how they just seem to fit in. Even as a practitioner, I sometimes, if I'm struggling in my own practice, I go back to look at the 12 principles and I use that as a framework for my clinical practice. And I just go right back to like observing, sitting and observing, not doing anything, and going through those processes until I really understand what it is that I need to do with that patient. So you can use those processes, those 12 principles, for treating people as well. It is a really useful framework. Holistic approaches, so it's about nutrition, it's about sanitation, it's about the health of your community, it's about what you eat, where you sleep, how you feel, lots of different things, and that's always going to be the approach that works on the longest scale. I mean, it fits really well with what you're doing, Rex. It seems to follow on really beautifully from what Rex was saying about mental health, being much more holistic care. Levels of knowledge. I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I've got some slides about that. And how to include herbs and herbal medicine into our lives and lives of others. I guess the thing is with that is that you've just got to experiment. And something that Jo said in her talk yesterday, a lot of it is about trust and intuition, and the more you listen and the more you trust, the more you'll gain, the more information you'll know. One of the theories about how we learn about medicinal plants is that the plants were our teachers. you know, and we used to commune with the plants and we used to sit and meditate with them. And there's still, I was trained at a place called the Scottish School of Herbal Medicine in Glasgow, which is very famous because it changed, it was totally unorthodox in the way that it taught. So we learned, after 4 years, we learned we knew 250 medicinal plants, but we tasted every single one of those plants. So we tasted it in a tea, we tasted it in a tincture, we applied them onto our skin, and we sat with them and meditated with them. And it's called the Goethean method. I don't know if people are familiar with the Goethean method. And that's what we did to learn about plants, so that it's all about that listening and sensing and developing that whole intuitive side of yourself. And there are still lots of people teaching plants. It's called plant spirit medicine quite often, and listening to plants and Goethean approaches to listening to plants. Again, if you want to know more about particular teachers of that, I can give you information, because there are people doing those methods for learning about it. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about limitations, because of course we don't live in a perfect world, and also solutions to those limitations. So, herbal medicine. Does anybody know this plant here? Is anybody familiar? Yeah. Yeah, this is actually sweet wormwood. It's called sweet Annie. It's Artemisia annua. This literally is my #1 plant, and I could just do a whole presentation on this plant. I worked an awful lot with this plant in Africa. It's primarily used for malaria as a prophylaxis and a treatment. It's very highly effective, used as a whole plant. I did say to myself I wasn't going to talk about this plant, but it's literally impossible for me not to. It's originally comes from traditional Chinese medicine pharmacopoeia, and it's used a lot for malaria, but I also use it a lot in my own practice for lots of gynecological, digestive issues. So herbal medicine, it's the use of whole plants, and this is really important. Whole plant use is really important. A lot of people are kind of coming around to the idea of taking herbal supplements, and I'm not a big advocate of herbal supplements. Like, you don't get the whole ethos of the plant by taking a pill. Like, tasting bitter, feeling bitter in your body is a good thing, and it's nourishing and restorative, you know. So it kind of it's like a reductionist approach to herbal medicine, and a lot of herbalists are really trying to get people away from taking extracted supplements to taking whole plants and having whole plant experiences as well. It's affordable as well. And whilst I was doing this presentation, I was kind of thinking a lot about Tanzania and places I've worked in Africa and my clinical practice. And in the more developing countries of the Southern Hemisphere, herbal medicine is definitely the most affordable form of medicine that people can take, because they can grow it locally, they can process it locally, there's not a lot of cost involved. Whereas here in the Western countries, it tends to be the most expensive form of medicine, because it's essentially a private form of healthcare. You have to pay for a consultation with a herbalist, you have to pay for the medicines, etc., etc. So my point is that when I was looking at the list of what herbal medicine is, if you look at it in two different contexts, they're almost opposing, because herbal medicine in the West, what isn't readily available, and herbalists are doing a lot to try and disseminate information about herbal medicine and encourage people to go and see herbalists. It's not culturally accepted. I say I'm a herbalist, people go, oh, you're a homeopath. No, I'm a herbalist, you know, so people don't understand. In Africa, I'd be like, I'm a herbalist. They're like, oh, Dr. Lucie. I'm like, not quite. You know, so there's totally different cultural understandings about it. It's gentle and effective. Lots of people say that herbal medicine, because something's gentle, it's not effective. It's not a strong medicine, and that pharmaceutical drugs are very strong. Herbal medicine is strong. I don't know if anybody's ever taken a tropobelladonna, or, I mean, we have a whole plant of psychoactives, you know, that have exception, monkshood being one of them. One single leaf can kill a horse, you know, so they are very strong. And they're also, most importantly, they have a low environmental impact. So I think that if we're having a consciousness about moving towards a more sustainable future, then herbal medicine is going to be really inclusive in that, because it has a much lower environmental impact, and it can also be grown locally. So you can do a lot to treat yourself.
Sorry, can I just ask, is it possible to have the door open?
Are you a
It's
bit
really
warm?
stuffy.
Well, maybe if we just open the blinds a little bit, it might feel like. But yes, open the door as well. You can still see the presentation, can't you? Yeah. Yeah, and also the other thing, whilst I was doing my permaculture training, when I was doing my PDC, I thought, oh, hold on here. Medicinal plants literally have the most stacking functions of all plants that I knew. You know, and so I was like, hold on, we'll just plant medicinal plant gardens. You know, because they're edible, they're medicinal, they're pollinators, they increase biodiversity, it's pharmacy, and also, very importantly, that they help to rebuild the soil, and there's all these echoes in the health of the soil, and the environment mirrors our own personal health too. So we use nettle and comfrey on the soil to regenerate it, and all the nitrogen fixes, all the Fabaceae, the pea family plants, to regenerate the soil. We can also use all of those on ourselves too as adrenal tonics. Rex mentioned adaptogens as well. All of those plants really help to regenerate ourselves. So when we're looking at the soil and all, you know, our environmental health, I think it's a great way to mirror back, like, how am I and how's my health as well. So holistic approaches, I mentioned about how to include. I wanted to talk a little bit about levels of knowledge, because I do think that it is important that we acknowledge and we understand our limitations too, you know, and that we appreciate that we have different people for different things in our community. And although our communities are a bit more fragmented, in more traditional societies, people very clearly understood their roles in the culture, and also where they sat and how much they could do and how much they couldn't do. So traditionally, the people who know the most, who know the broadest amount of information about medicinal plants, are the mothers, are the women, because they use herbal medicine to treat their children, and they learn from their mothers and their grandmothers, and it's all about first aid. So you're treating diarrhea, you're treating coughs and colds and fevers, and that all of those things can still be used. And I know that there's an awful lot of fear amongst people about using herbs on children. You know, I regularly get asked in emails, my friend's got a 2-year-old, do you think it's safe to use herbs? And I say, is it safe to be giving them paracetamols and Calpols and all of those other things? And personally, with my own child, I'd rather do the more gentle approach. It might take a while, but to do that rather than giving them pharmaceuticals. But that's also about knowing your limits, you know. So it's important to be well educated about what your limits are and how far you're comfortable to go. So this is a picture from a garden in Mexico, whereby it's women practicing herbal medicine, and they've gained a lot of information about how to treat an awful lot of diseases. And you know, the knowledge cascades. The more you learn, the more you know, the more you keep on learning, and you just keep absorbing the information. Of course, midwifery has its own speciality, obstetrics and gynecology, we would call it. But midwives also, again, women tend to be a lot of the keepers of knowledge and information. These are Senegalese women. Same again, women collecting medicinal plants. And then, so we have the lay people who have general knowledge, who tend to be the women. And then we move into more specialist areas who tend to be, I guess the equivalent would be, we would move into consultants in the NHS. So these people tend to specialise in one particular area. So it would be women's health, or it would be paediatrics, or it would be the bone setters, and it would be surgeons. People did traditionally used to perform surgery. And then here, like the Sangoma in South Africa, we have the people, the highest form of healers, which is the shaman. So that's to do with community problems and spiritual problems. So limitations, some of the limitations that I really see at the moment, and a lot of herbalists are really concerned and talking about this, is that there's not enough people formally studying herbal medicine, certainly not in the UK. There's only 2 courses now left in the UK, up to the level of BSc, which means that you can actually gain insurance and become a licensed practitioner. And there's also not enough people undertaking apprenticeships because of time and money constraints. How are people going to make money and survive and And also, not so much here, but also in other countries where urbanisation is a big problem, and we've heard lots about that through the whole conference, that knowledge transmission is being stunted by problems of modernity. Certain rural-urban migration is causing huge fractions in the passing of knowledge between people, and people think that it's not a worthwhile profession to undertake anymore. So in one workshop that I attended, someone asked a question about how do we help young people to see the value in doing something alternative. And also the other thing, government restrictions on herbal medicines as well. Unfortunately, there is an awful lot going on in the European authorities to try and regulate herbal medicine and to kind of squash it down. A lot of herbalists, like permaculturalists, are quite kind of anti-authoritarian anyway, and I'm going to do this anyway. And if we look back historically, witches were burnt at the stake for what they did, but they carried on doing it because this is something that you feel and you need to do. So it won't ever die, but it is something that's there to be aware of. And then solutions, so more support for natural health workers, more inclusion of herbal medicine teaching on a local level, on a national level, and on an international level as well. And promoting and showing support to herbalists as well, encouraging people to go and see a herbalist where you know your knowledge is limited, campaigning for real medicine, and being informed. Anything else? Can anybody else think of solutions? Yes?
I think one of them is to openly speak to people about it who are like really against it. Like I do that at time with my friends and stuff who are like against herbalism. They're like, no, they're really sick and need to go and see a doctor and take prescriptions. I'm like, yeah, but where do the prescriptions come from? Like, where did the medicine come from? It comes from herbs. Yeah. But what they did is they just isolated something, and now you get the side effects because you're not getting the whole broad range of everything the plant produces.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. It's like openly talk to people about it and where it actually comes from, how it relates to us.
Yeah, and maybe we just learned something really important from Rosalind as well, because I come up against this a lot. It becomes confrontational because it's about 2 systems opposing each other, and I think I used to be a lot more kind of aggressive than I am now, and now I tend to want to step to the side and dissolve that confrontation. And it's like having an evidence-based practice and having belief that herbal medicine is an efficacious form of medicine will help people to understand. Yes?
We did a really successful event in Cyprus where we chose nettle, which is really abundant there, and we did it, but we brought it in through food, because you can also cook it you can also use it as a medicine, but people you can connect with them through their stomachs. So we had a lot of different dishes made of nettle and all that kind of stuff. And then we also did what you said, which is connecting to someone who's from the area who has a lot of knowledge. She's a very famous herbalist from the island, and she came and she spoke. So it was that kind of like authority, because you still kind of need, she's got a PhD, and so she's been formally educated, but she was very passionate about the herb. And I think that was very successful. And then we had different things that we made with nettle, and that we found a lot of positive feedback through that.
And that's wonderful that you mentioned that, actually, because kind of having subversive ways of getting herbal medicine in there. And I know that in the UK there's this massive foraging movement. Like, foraging has become super popular. Like, even my mum is like, I'm going foraging. My mum doesn't do that, but it is kind of cool and trendy now, and people are doing it, and they don't realise that they're taking medicinal plants. A bit of nettle pesto and lime flower tea, and there are lots of ways in incorporating it and doing sometimes just doing herb walks, you know, people know the edibles and you're like, oh, but you know that's also medicinal. Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food, as Hippocrates said. Which is part of it as well, that we need health through food too. And you mentioned gut health too, which is vitally important. Yes? Yes, you at the back there.
I just wanted to agree with what you said. I think especially as to connect it through culinary means, I think it's very important. I just came back from Spain, from Catalonia, and there is in Lleida, I believe that there's a farm that has been specializing in growing medicinal plants for selling mainly to markets and to restaurants as well. So it's very much, I guess, in the culinary world, it's very in vogue. But there's still propagation of like medicinal plants like purslane or dockweed or bergamot and a lot of things like that. So people now, they're foraging more, they're looking for it, but it's definitely like a business.
Yeah, and also like inside of that, you know, one way in which we can improve our personal health, you know, the whole biodiversity thing is very important for resilience and resistance, like to incorporate loads of herbs into your diet, like loads of parsley and basil in salads as a salad leaf, not just as an accoutrement to a particular dish. Like the Persians quite often make salads out of basil and parsley, and that's it. And you have that depth and richness of flavour, which is fantastic. And we're like, well, I'll put a little leaf of basil on my pasta. You know, just go for it. Buy a whole bunch of parsley and put that in your salad, and that becomes a better way of really incorporating it. And herbal teas, you know, replace your beverages with long steeped herbal teas, because the longer you steep them, the more minerals are coming out, especially things like nettle and comfrey. So maybe, what I should just do is I should say that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. Oh, I'll put my details up, and then we're already a few minutes over. But maybe we can just have a few questions and then we'll wrap up. We'll say 3 questions and then we'll wrap up, and then I'll just stay behind. So you, sir, at the back, the lady, and these 2 ladies here. So on you go.
Another solution is to form local support groups. When I lived in Malawi, we had an action for natural medicine group that met monthly, and each month we would share about a particular medicinal plant, and that was a wonderful way of strengthening herbal medicine.
That's wonderful. I used to work for Animed. So Animed, this is them, Action for Natural Medicine. They're a German-based organisation. I've done quite a bit of work with them. And in Malawi, they have a very strong, movement of people trying to incorporate permaculture and herbal medicine together. Yes.
Just mention that there's a group of people organising a conference called Plant Consciousness. This is the second one. I don't know what the date is, but I saw an email copy, so if you Google Plant Consciousness, you'll find it.
Right, great. There is also I went to a festival just earlier on this year called the Radical Herbalism Gathering as well, which was amazing. And if you like plants, you don't have to be a herbalist to go, but it's a really fab, really small, intimate festival. They had it in Shrewsbury this year. Look up Radical Herbalism Gathering. Is that right? Yeah? Just look, Google. Yes, lady with the glasses, next question.
I've been thinking for a while now. I want to learn much more about it, and I do try to use some basic herbs. But also, there is the fact that all food is medicine, all vegetables are.
Yeah.
And I do use beetroot if I think my blood pressure might be rising a bit, or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a crossover between, and I don't think that traditionally we would really differentiate between food and medicine, because the plants quite, you know, when you look at Joe mentioned the hedgerow the other day, when you look at plants when they're growing in wild, they grow in the stories, you know, and nature has been very clever in the way that it presented itself, that you have this multifaceted layer, and it was medicinal and it is food. And, you know, as a practitioner, I do a lot of treatment through diet, because it is the primary way in which people's health will make significant changes.
But that's perhaps one of the ways we can persuade people to go that little bit first, that first step, and then move on.
Yeah, I guess that when you say herbal medicine, it's kind of been tarred with a bad brush. You know, we're still suffering the consequences of Christianization and the burning of the witches. If we said, I don't know, just anything else, it's like permaculture as well. You know, that word is a bit like. So maybe we just need, like natural medicine. A lot of people, Animed and Discover, they use natural. They say natural medicine. Or garden medicine, yeah, there's just something about it that just seems to soften the tone. Herbal medicine, I don't know what, because herbs, I like the word herbs, it's a nice word. And if Americans say it, they say herbs, you know. So, natural medicine. So thanks everybody for coming, and have a lovely afternoon, and thanks to you too again. Anybody's cell phone?
Hi. That was really good. I'm into a master's in herbal medicine, but I study psychology. So I just wanted to check, because I emailed a guy, like some leader of the organisation that we have to be part of to do a degree. Just want to be part of the
National Institute of Medical
It's like for me it was the BPS, British Psychology Society. You can't join it unless you're either on a course or you've already done the study. But to join the BSc programme, even though you don't need a degree in it, you have to be part of that member. You have to be a member. So it's like a catch-22. So I can't get onto a master's because I'm not a member, even though. So you can't become a member unless you want to really study. So it's a bit of a obstruction really for the study. So I'm not very good at public speaking, but when you said then about things that can be done, that really needs to be addressed, because I would love to go on and study, and I'd love to do a master's, but I can't even get onto a master's because I can't become part of the body that you need to be to join the master's.
So there's a big debate at the moment amongst herbalists about regulation and
Which is so important.
But there are a lot of herbalists who are just rejecting it.
I'm setting up a program at school.
Need a BA in order to practice because of the insurance in order to practice.
I've got no experience though, so I've got my own experience, but I would need to study. I would need to do some study, so I wouldn't want to be practicing in it until I learned something. But I can't learn until I'm
Well, I've never heard that before, because I didn't think that you had to be an organisation.
It must just be because it's a master's, so they must be saying it's been really bugging me, because I've been trying to find it on my phone to double check it, because the guy that's emailed me is like, there's only 2 masters that he's aware of in the country.
About ethnobotany though?
No, herbal medicine. Yeah, I was trying to double check my information before I came to speak to you, because I knew you'd ask me that, I need to know that myself.
Why don't you email me? Why don't you take my, this is my...
Yeah, because once I get home I'll get all the information. My internet keeps dropping out here.
No, I haven't been down there yet.
So yestrees@gmail.com. So email me and I want to run as well. So I can also post it to you as well and see if there's any information. Thanks very much.
There you go. Oh, sorry, Mr. Tom.
If there are some courses or something that you could recommend, maybe something practical, right? I would be interested.
If you email me, then I can send you a list.
Oh, that'd be super, yeah.
Were you talking about the Malawi?
Animate.
Yeah. So, have you been?
Yes, I lived in Malawi for 7 years. And we had a very active animate group. Still on.
I would love to do a course there.
Yeah,
They do like week courses there. So what you're talking about is week-long
they do week-long courses there.
on the way to Dedza.
Yes, animate. Nelson Moyo.
Nelson Moyo.
Running course.
I'd love to do that.
Is I wonder if you would have any connections with any people that might be training or that might want to volunteer something with me.
Yeah.
Do something like that. Do you know where to lead me into that direction? Where are you based, Stroud?
Oh, you're in like the perfect place. There's tons of herbalists around there. So you're looking for a herbalist to kind of work with to help implement a medicinal plant garden, is that what you're saying? Okay. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
I'm not a herbalist, but I've just done an apprenticeship.
Hi Sam.
I'm a gardener.
Yeah, good. I'm just still in room 1. I just want to speak with the herbalist
I'm really
here.
jealous of all your training that you've done and the effort to me, but I've come from
Okay then. All right. Hope you guys well. Okay.
I hope I didn't offend you.
No, I didn't.